notice, I think it's fair for us to get the final word on this.
We provided the report March 3rd, Your Honor, as a specious argument that there's no notice at this point.
Well, my understanding is that the people has Mr. Sutton, and again, the court has not allowed that in their case in chief. Potentially that can come in as a rebuttal witness. The defense might have a rebuttal witness, depending on what Mr. Sutton's going to say. But Mr. Colby and Mr. Atwell, we're not going to have an open-ended where, we're going to go back and forth with new witnesses. And so, at this point, I foresee, unless there are extraordinary circumstances that the defense may cause her rebuttal witness, depending on what Mr. Sutton's going to say, and whether you feel there's a need to. It's up to you whether you feel there's a need, and then we can, whoever that witness is, we're going to have to find maybe as an offer of proof what the witness is going to testify to, and whether it falls within the purview of a certain rebuttal witness, and that would be the end of that. Now, I would also indicate again, I don't know what Mr. Sutton would testify. Part of the concern of the court is not only is he a late witness, but I understand that he's going to potentially testify as an expert witness. About accounting practices and that type of things. I don't know if that's expert testimony at this point, but certainly Mr. Sutton can testify even without those kind of things. He can certainly testify as to intrinsic value. I don't know if he would have any knowledge of that, personal knowledge of intrinsic value. Being executive of the company, I would assume he would have the ability to testify to that, even without complex accounting practices or procedures that they employ. And that would require expert testimony. And so, in other words, what the court's trying to indicate is we're not going to have multiple days or multiple hours of testimony regarding complex accounting, economic calculations. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but the law doesn't require it. The law requires intrinsic value.
Understood, Your Honor.
And so the testimony, in other words, the testimony of anybody that you brought in is subject to objections if it goes beyond the purview of what the law allows in terms of the relevant issues. You can bring the best, the foremost expert in chicken economics in, but I don't think that's going to be an issue that's going to be admissible or necessary. So.
Understood, Your Honor, based on the interview I had and the summary of that interview I provided to the defense, I believe in Mr. Sutton's testimony is going to be a particularly complex exon.
Okay.
And Your Honor, I would just disagree with that characterization, even the terminology of things like rendering credits. I still don't have a clear sense of what that means, and I've been working in this area for 20 years. So I think this is expert testimony, and it is going to be complex and confusing for the jury, and we are entitled to an expert to respond.
Right.
Actually, Your Honor, Mr. Sutton, and this is disclosed in the report that was discovered in defense counsel a week ago, Mr. Sutton is employed by Foster Farms specifically for the purpose of valuation here. He's not an expert evaluating the situation. He's saying what the value was to the company as an employee of the company. Just so we're clear, we're disputing that he is in fact an expert witness. We're stating that he is a witness, a representative of the company who's the victim in this case, who can provide a valuation. It's as simple as that.
Right, yeah, under that basis, I wouldn't understand Mr. Sutton to be an expert witness, unless he starts providing opinion that falls within the realm of expert testimony, then that might be a different story. But he can certainly testify to Foster Farms practices value of the chickens, intrinsic or otherwise, based on his personal knowledge. Anything else? Okay. If not, we'll go ahead and take a couple of minutes break. We should have the first and second panel come. I want you to make sure you pay attention to the questions that I'll be asking the folks here in the box. And again, as indicated earlier to the folks in courtroom 2, if any of them are excused for any reason, you'll be called to fill in. Right now, we're going to talk to them, but I don't want you to tune out. Make sure you pay attention, because if any of the questions apply to you and the issues apply to you when you are called in, we want you to disclose those to us. All right. Ladies and gentlemen.
Your Honor, if I might very
Yes.
quickly, would you mind if we just poll the people on the panel real quick, just because the numbers were pretty quick?
Oh,
When they were
just
read?
the badge
Just to
number?
just to get the names and badge numbers real quick.
Okay,
If possible.
we'll just get the batch numbers, not their names.
Okay.
So we'll start with, we'll go down the list, and your number 1, the last 4 digits, your batch number.
8574.
6449.
0185.
7217. 6031.
Sorry, could you slow down just a bit so I could write down? What was 4?
7217.
7217.
6031.
7217.
So 4 and 6 are the same number, so we get 5 numbers.
Okay,
You want to show you the one?
So it's,
yeah, go 5 numbers.
5 numbers from you.
I remember, you guys have the last 4 numbers or something.
7217.
27217.
Go ahead, your son.
4230.
Go ahead.
7056.
24450. 1352.
Can we just slow down just a tiny bit, sorry, just so I can write them down?
9201.
I'm sorry, can we go back to number 10?
1352.
10 is 1352.
9201.
5486.
5776. 5776.
0483.
3089. 3612.
2928.
5130. 3362. 9010.
Okay, we're good. Ladies and gentlemen, in this trial, each side is entitled to have a fair and unbiased and unprejudiced jury. Okay, so if there's any fact or reason why you think you might be biased or prejudiced in any way, then you must disclose that to us, okay, for any reason. It is your duty to make that disclosure. Now, to say that you might have a bias or prejudice, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. That's life. We all come to the jury room with different life experiences, and sometimes those experiences color the way we would judge certain things, judge certain issues. There's no escaping that. But what we mean by bias or unprejudiced, what we mean is that you can keep a fair and open mind, listen to all the evidence, listen to the law, the arguments of counsel before you make up your mind. Right? That you not already make up your mind because of one issue or another about the case. Now, let me give you an example. Assume that my Aunt Patty loves cats, okay? Unfortunately, her favorite cat was run over by a bus one day. And although she would make a great juror in the end of the case, if this case is about cats and buses, she would not be a very good juror, right? Because maybe that experience is just would color it the way she would make a terrible juror, because that experience would color it the way she would judge this case. She probably would have her mind already made up. And so that's the kind of things that we want to make sure that if any of the issues that we talk about, the attorneys are going to talk about, apply to you, make sure that you let us know. Our intent is not to pry into private matters or unnecessarily embarrass you in any way. But if there's any issue that we talk about that has a bearing on how you might decide as a juror, what you think about certain issues, both sides as well as the court is entitled to know that, so that both sides can be, the case can be decided by a fair, unbiased, unprejudiced jury. Now, having said about the cat, this case, as I told you yesterday or the day before yesterday, is alleges by the people, complaint has been filed against the defendants, theft of 2 chickens from Foster Farms. Okay? Let me just start with that. Does anybody here work for Foster Farms or has a family, friend, close family member or friend who works for Foster Farms? Those who are juror 18. Okay, juror number 7. Let me start with, okay, let's start with juror number 1. Did you?
No, I was scratching my head.
Scratching your head. Juror number 2.
Real quick question, what if they worked for them prior?
Oh, previously worked for,
Yeah, but they
yes.
just recently,
They're no longer there.
yeah, just
Okay,
recently.
and who is this person?
It's my friend's husband?
Your friend's husband? Okay, you're pretty close to this friend?
Yes.
Okay, they're no longer at Foster Farms.
No.
Do you, with that relationship, and that the fact that he worked for Foster Farm, how would that impact you if you were picked as a juror in this case? Would it affect you in any way, how you would judge this case?
I was just wondering.
It would not affect. You would be able to keep your open mind.
Yeah.
In other words, you're not gonna say, well, because my friend's husband worked for Foster Farms, I have some sympathy for Foster Farms. I have, some faith, and so I'm gonna, regardless what the evidence is, I'm gonna favor what the people's case is, because people are representing the people, the alleged victim here is Foster Farms. You're not gonna do it. You can keep your open mind. Okay, good. All right, anybody else in the back row? Let's start with the first row. Yes, ma'am, juror number 7.
My aunt works for Foster.
Your aunt worked for Foster Farms, okay. And your aunt, are you pretty close to your aunt?
Yes.
Okay. Does she still work for Foster Farms?
Yes.
Okay. Same question for you. Would you be able to, put that issue aside, relationship aside, and not hold that relationship, not faithful Foster Farms, or not, unfairly punish the defendants because the alleged victim happens to be Foster Farms?
I would be objective.
You'd be objective, fair, open mind. Okay, all right. Yes, I think you're number 8. You did raise your hand. Yes.
My husband and my father-in-law both work security at Foster Farm.
Okay.
They don't currently, my father-in-law retired and my husband quit years ago, but they both work.
Okay, they work there. Okay. You said your husband was fired?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard you. What did you say?
No, he quit, it's just been years since he worked.
Oh, okay, it's been years since he's
So
worked
my
there.
father-in-law retired from there.
Oh, retired, I'm
They
sorry.
both work
Right.
security.
Okay. I'm sorry, I misheard that. Retired, okay, they both work security. Okay, so both of them do not work for Foster Farms now.
Correct.
It looks like it's been a while since they've had any relationship with Foster
My
Farms.
husband and my father-in-law, not quite as long, about 8 years.
About what?
8 years.
About 8 years, okay. Anything about those relationships that you think would have an effect on how you would judge in this case, judge this case?
Possibly because having them work in security, I've heard a lot of stories about different things that had happened there when they were there.
Okay. Well, this case didn't happen, I think, 8 years ago. It happened about 2 years ago. Okay. Would you, if you're picked as a juror, would you be able to set aside what you've heard happened 8 years ago, or happened stories that your husband and father-in-law told you? Did you say your father or your
Father-in-law.
father and husband? Would you be able to set those stories aside and not let those affect how you would judge the facts of this case?
It's hard for me because my dad was in law enforcement too,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm more inclined to side on law enforcement side.
On law enforcement side. I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll come back to that in a bit. Okay. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Okay. So you think it might be hard for you because of those relationships? Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the, yes, juror number 12?
Yeah. My cousin works at Foster Farm.
Your cousin works there, still works there now?
Yeah, she does.
How close are you to your cousin?
We're pretty close.
Okay. And how do you feel about, serving on the jury now because your cousin's there, which would it affect how you would judge this case?
No.
Okay. Does he tell you things about what happened in Foster Farms? Good or bad things?
I mean, like, it's work, so like,
Yeah,
you're gonna not talk greatly about your job all the time. But
Yeah.
I guess it's just regular work
sure.
stuff.
Well, would it affect how you would, you might say, well, let's just say you heard bad stories about his experience with his employer. Would it cause you to say, well, I'm not going to believe anything that the people said, the prosecution said, because I don't have a very favorable view of Foster Farms?
No, I think I'll
But
do
you're not going to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. And vice versa, you're not going to hold it against the defendants because your cousin works
it.
there?
Definitely.
Okay, all right, you can keep the fair open mind. All right. Anybody else on the second row? Okay, and third row here, sir. Juror number,
Grandfather worked security for 20 years and he's retired now, and a close friend was a ranch manager.
okay, close friend is for ranch manager. Those relationships, tell me how they would, if they have any impact on how you would, whether you'd be able to have, keep in a fair open mind.
Well, grandfather would not really have an impact, but a close friend possibly would, because I've heard plenty of stories.
Okay. Tell me how that would impact.
Most of the stories were negative in nature, so I would say
Okay.
it leaned more toward Foster Farms.
You would lean toward Foster Farms, favoring Foster
Yeah.
Farms. Okay. Because of your, you said your close friend currently working in security now.
No, that was my grandfather.
That's
a
your-
ranch manager.
Oh, a ranch manager.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. When you talk about negative stories, are you talking about negative stories of people who are not affiliated with Foster Farms, perhaps having issues with ranch issues?
Well, both, yes.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay, so some of these stories.
Right.
Okay, because of that, has negative, yeah. All right.
And father was also in law enforcement, so.
Law enforcement, gotcha. All right, anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I have a close friend who works at the quality control in Rangoon.
Okay, quality control, all right. And still works there.
Currently works
Okay.
there.
Let's tell you about some of the issues at work that he
Um,
experiences.
Yes, a little bit, but I don't think it affects my ability to.
Okay, it would not affect you to, hold anything against the defendants or favor foster farms
I don't think so.
or against foster farms? Okay, you can keep an open mind. Okay, good. Anybody else? All right, okay. So what I'm gonna do then is, at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and excuse juror number 8, ma'am. Okay, thank you for coming today. And I'm gonna excuse juror number, sir, let's see, your number, I'm not sure what number you are. 15?
18.
18, yeah, 18, yeah, 18, thank you, sir. Foster farms or any close family or friends who work for foster farms? No? Okay. All right, anything about, we talked about so far that you think will cause you to, not be able to sit in this case, to be fair and impartial? All right. I'm gonna expand on the issue a little bit. You know, the issue here is, again, involves the alleged taking of 2 chickens from foster farms without their consent. And does anybody here raise chickens or have chickens as pets? Okay, a couple of people? All right. Juror number, let's see, 12, no, 11, okay? Tell me about, tell me what,
I have 9 pet chickens.
okay,
Always been having chickens all my life.
okay,
Currently they're my babies.
okay, how do you feel about your chicken?
I love them.
Okay, yeah. Have a close
Yeah.
personal relationship with your chicken? So this case involves chicken. It's almost like the Aunt Patty, cats and buses thing. Would you be able to set aside your relationship and how you're feeling with chickens, set those aside and judge this case based solely on the facts of this case?
It's gonna be hard.
Yeah, it could be hard for you to do that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Juror number 11, right? Somebody else raised their hand. Yes, ma'am, I'll start with you. Juror number 16.
17.
17? Okay, 17, sorry, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, 17.
I have both types of chickens,
Okay,
for eggs and for meat.
okay.
I raise my own.
You raise your own chicken, okay. Is that, how would that affect your ability to keep a fair open mind, if any?
Not really. I mean, it's not gonna really affect me.
Okay, all right. So the fact that you do raise chickens, that's not gonna have an impact on how you would judge?
No.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's my personal, I don't know. I feel safer raising my own for
Okay,
food, you know?
sure.
I mean, if that makes any sense.
Okay, yeah, your personal, health reasons?
Yes,
You-
there you
Okay.
go, there you go.
Okay. Even with that belief, that you feel it's safer for you to raise your own chicken and eggs from your chicken? Okay. You know, foster farms mass produce, as I think it's common knowledge, eggs and chicken, I think. I don't know if they do eggs, but at least chicken. And if you're still a juror, would you would you have some kind of, would you have a negative feeling toward foster farms that said, because of the way they're practiced, I'm against them, and so,
No.
in this case, is, yeah?
I don't have anything against anyone. It's how they choose to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with me.
Right. You choose to have, and that's great, you choose to have your raise your own, but in other words, you wouldn't hold it against any commercial establishment
Oh,
for having raised chicken
No.
on a commercial basis.
no.
All right. Juror number 18.
My parents are currently raising chickens. I have about 50 chickens. We raise it.
Okay. Your parents do, but you yourself?
No, I live with my parents.
You live with your parents?
Yeah.
Okay, but you don't take care of them and
Once in
you
a
don't
while.
have chicken pets in other words?
No.
Okay. And so does that have anything, the fact that your parents raise chicken, does that have any bearing? Well, how would it affect, if any, you being able to keep a fair open mind?
It wouldn't affect me at all, and I will keep it fair open mind.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I think juror number 11, I'm gonna go ahead and excuse you. Okay? All right, thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and call another juror.
8292.
All right. Now, juror 11, anything that we talked about so far apply to you? Okay? All right. Let me move on to the next item. And, the attorneys may have more questions about that issue, and they might want to follow up some questions. But at this point, I'm going to move on to the next item. There will be some witnesses who, in a trial, obviously, what that means is that evidence will come in, and one of the ways that evidence come in is that witnesses will testify. They'll come in and testify about what happened, about what they saw, what they heard, okay, and what they say, what they saw, what they heard, what they perceived. Those would be what we call those are evidence. Those are testamentary evidence. Now, where bias might come in is that if you know one of the witnesses, you have some relationship with one of the witnesses, or you may have some favor toward one type of witness, or have some ill will toward another type of witness, for example, that cause you to not be able to be fair and impartial. One of the jurors mentioned, for example, that she has family members who are in law enforcement, and because of that, she would tend to favor law enforcement. In this case, the people will have some witnesses that will be brought in to testify. Okay, and one of the person is Livingston Police Department officer Nick Kirk. We will also have a gentleman working for Foster Farms whose name is Jamie Jimenez. We'll also have a gentleman, I believe, working for Foster Farms whose name is Eligio Hernandez. We might have also a witness by the name of Shane Sutton who works for Foster Farms. Does anybody here in the box know any of these individuals? Okay, did you guys get all the names? Okay. All right, I'll come back to for the defense. They also have potential witnesses that will call. When I say potential, ladies and gentlemen, they may or they may not testify, but at this point, the defense, there's a gentleman, Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg. Anybody here happen to know him? I'm not sure where he's from, but potentially he's a potential witness. Okay. Anybody here knows him? A gentleman by the name of Reverend Christopher Whitco. Yeah. If you know him, just raise your hand. Celeste Yamada. Daphne Zuniga. Daryl Hanna. And some of these folks, you might have heard of them. So we'll talk about those in a minute. But what I want you to see, if you know them personally or have some relationships with them. Dotsie Bosch. Let's see. That's what I have on the defense witness counsel. Did I miss anybody?
That's correct.
That's
Your Honor.
complete. Okay. All right.
Your Honor, that was just Ms. Paul's witnesses. We had filed some disclosures. I'm happy to read off the list for.
Okay, would you please answer?
Yes, the potential defense witnesses would first be Raven Deerbrook, Bonnie Murphy,
Okay.
Sarah Chakron. Oh, sorry, Bonnie Clapper, not Bonnie Murphy. Sarah Chakron. And that'll be all.
Okay. Anybody knows of these people, have close relationship with them, friendship with them, family members? Okay. All right. Does anybody here know Mr. Kobe or works at his office with the Merced County District Attorney's Office, as well as Mr. Joseph Atwell? Joseph? Okay. Anybody has family members who work for the District Attorney's Office? Okay. We also have mentioned to you the two defendants here, Ms. Alexandra Paul and Ms. Alicia Santurio. Anybody here related to them? One knows them personally. Okay. All right. So let me talk about the law enforcement issue a little bit. Again, there's at least one witness here who is in law enforcement, and that's Livingston Police Department, Nick Kirk. All right. Does anybody here in the box you yourself work in law enforcement or have close family members who are in law enforcement? Okay. All right, a couple of people raised their hand. Juror number, I'll start in the back again. Juror number 7.
My stepson is highway patrol.
Stepson is highway patrol, okay. All right, and juror number 8.
My son-in-law is a sergeant with Baywatch PD.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? So juror number 14?
I myself work at Merced Police Department.
Okay, you're,
I'm a
Merced
CSO.
PD?
Yeah,
Okay, are you an officer there or
I'm a CSO, a community service officer.
community service officer? Okay. Okay, anybody else? Okay, juror number 21?
My father is a police officer for the city of Stockton.
Okay, father, okay. All right, anybody else? Okay. Now, all right, the law in this case states that, if you're sitting as a juror, okay, you are to treat each witness who comes in and who testifies, put them on an equal plane, okay? I mean, after you hear them testify, how they testify, you can judge with their credibility. You can judge whether the story is true or not. But you're not to favor one witness or over another simply because of their status or their position in life or their work, that type of things, okay? And we have one witness, for example, who said because, I have a close family member who works in law enforcement, I'm going to favor law enforcement, all right? And that's understandable. The three of you who's mentioned that you have close family members who work law enforcement, would you do that? Would you be able to keep a very open mind and say, because, Officer Nick Kirk is with Livingston PD, no matter what he says, I'm just gonna believe. In other words, right? If you do that, then you already close up your mind, right? And you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay? Juror number 8, would you be able to, you don't think you would do that, okay? You're not gonna give law enforcement any preferential treatment simply because of that relationship, okay? Juror number 14? Yeah, you're a CSO, okay? So, yeah, because of your position, you work in law enforcement. Let's just, for example, say Officer Nick Kirk comes and says something that you find not credible. Would you be able to say, I don't believe his story because he's not credible, even though he's a police officer?
I will be able to.
You'll be able to do that, okay? You're not gonna favor him simply because you work in law enforcement and he's also in law enforcement?
No.
Okay, all right. And juror number 21? Your dad works in law enforcement, okay? What about you?
I do not work in law enforcement, but I do have the guilty until proven innocent mindset.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, you don't think law enforcement, the fact that your father's law enforcement bothers you, but the fact that, that you think a person is guilty until they're proven innocent? Is that what you're saying, or the other way around?
That's correct.
Okay, so if they're charged with a crime, or they're brought here in court, they have to prove their innocence to you?
Yes.
Okay, they presume, in other words, you presume them to be guilty?
Yes, I will most likely favor law enforcement.
I'm sorry?
I will most likely favor law enforcement.
You most likely law enforcement. Why is that? It may be because, you did your father tell you about, his law enforcement experiences?
Yes.
Yeah, some of the cases that he's involved in?
Yes.
Okay. So because of that, you might have a hard time believing that, people who are charged with a crime, the Constitution says they are presumed to be innocent. You understand that?
Yes.
You understand that, but it's still difficult for you to believe it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Anybody else? I think we talked about 3. Yes, ma'am.
I would be open-minded.
You'll be okay. You also have. Oh, that's right. You have. You said somebody. Your stepson is in highway patrol. Okay, but you can set that relationship aside and not favor law enforcement because of that relationship. Okay, good, thank you. All right, juror number 21, I'm gonna go ahead and excuse you. I wanna thank you for your honesty. Okay, thank you. Very good. Now, let me just, again, we've already talked about it, but let me talk a little bit about the charge again. Again, the people in this case have alleged, the defendants, without consent or authorization, took 2 chickens from foster farms. And typically the law calls that theft. Has anybody here been, you yourself have been accused or convicted of a similar charge, similar crime? Okay, juror number 9.
Yeah, I was not raised very well, so I've had to get by.
Okay. All right. When was the last one?
No, I've never been convicted. I've been accused. I've never been convicted of anything.
You've been accused. Okay, gotcha.
The last time would have been roughly 7 years ago.
Okay. How do you feel about it? So it's been a while, but how do you feel about that experience? Given that this case is, alleged allegations of theft.
I am staunchly anti-police, and I'm also vegan.
Okay.
I do not think I would be able to serve impartially on a jury.
In this case?
In this case.
Okay, gotcha. All right. All right. I thank you. I appreciate your honesty. Okay, anybody else? And similar charges or similar experience? Or maybe you are a victim, you're a victim of theft, or burglary, or similar crime, property crime victims. Anybody here? Okay, all right. Does anybody have a concern, overall, that because this involves allegations of theft, that, as the gentleman said, I cannot be fair and impartial because of the type of case that this case involves? Okay, all right. Okay, juror number 9, I'm going to thank you for your honesty.
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and excuse you. All right, juror number 9. Anything that we have talked about that would have a bearing on you? You would keep a fair open mind. Nothing applies to you so far? Okay, thank you. All right. Now, the young lady that I excused, she mentioned about the presumption. I want to talk a little bit about that. This is critically important. If you're selected as a jury, okay, it's important you understand some of the fundamental laws in this country that would apply to this case, applies to every criminal case. Anybody who's ever been charged with a crime brought to trial or arrested, okay, for a crime, and maybe not brought to trial. Okay. And these are fundamental. These are set forth in the highest law in our country. That's called the U.S. Constitution. Okay, this is the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof. Okay, the presumption of innocence means that when somebody's been charged with a crime, arrested for a crime, accused of a crime, in this country they are presumed to be innocent until there is evidence that have been proved that they are guilty. Do you understand that? Do you understand that as Ms. Paul and Ms. Santurio sits here before you, they are presumed innocent, not guilty. All right? They have inner pleas are not guilty, but that's really besides the point. Okay? They're presumed to be innocent. And so if I'm to ask you now to vote, to show you vote and see if they're guilty or not, the only decision that you can make that would be upheld by the highest law in our country is that they are not guilty. Do you understand that? Because you have not heard the evidence, and they are presumed by law to be innocent. Okay. Does anybody have any concern about this standard? I'm glad the young lady that I excused earlier mentioned that, because some people might believe, well, if somebody's been accused of a crime, they're arrested for a crime, or they're here in court, they must be guilty. Why, otherwise, why would they be here? You understand that's not the law. And that's so fundamental to what this country is all about. You can imagine a country where perhaps a different standard is used. An authoritarian country where if you're arrested of a crime, you're presumed to be guilty, and it's up to you to prove your innocence. That's a very scary system to live under. So I'm very fortunate, we're all very fortunate we don't live under that kind of system. And we live in a system where you're presumed to be innocent. And it's up to the state, up to the government, the state, or in this case the people, the district attorney, to prove guilt. And we'll talk about the standard of proof in a minute. But does anybody have any concern about this? That at this point, the defendants are presumed to be innocent. Okay. Anybody believe the contrary of what the young lady earlier said? Okay, so you can uphold this standard of presumption of innocence. Do you understand? Okay, all right, very good. Now, if the two defendants here are presumed to be innocent, what this means is, several things follow from this. Okay, one is, if they're presumed to be innocent, who has the burden? We call it the burden of proof. Who has the burden to bring in the evidence? To show you, to convince you that the defendants are guilty. Anybody want to take a guess? And you kind of mentioned, you go ahead and say it out loud.
They do.
They be the people.
The people.
Yeah, the district attorney. And you were exactly right. Okay, what about, defense counsel here? Do they have to do anything?
No, because they're innocent until they prove them guilty.
Okay, and you were exactly right. Right? So if the defense attorneys decide that after the people present all the evidence that there's not enough evidence to convince you, they don't have to present any evidence. Okay, they can just sit there and not do anything. I'm sure they're going to ask questions. I'm sure they're going to do their job. But the point is, they don't have to convince you that their client is innocent. Okay, their client's already presumed to be innocent. They don't have to call in witnesses. They don't have to bring in evidence. They don't have to do anything to convince you if they choose not to. All right. Anybody here understand that the burden of proof, that the district attorney has the burden? Okay. All right. Anyone has a problem with that? All right. Now, so if the district attorney has to convince you by bringing in evidence that the defendants are guilty of the crime charged in this case, the next question follows is, well, what is that standard? Okay. Yeah. What is that standard of evidence? Okay. Standard of proof. Not who has the burden. The district attorney has, but there's not a good way to say it, but it's how much evidence do they have to bring? I mean, how much, not in terms of the actual number or number of witnesses, but what type of evidence, how much evidence is enough for you to say, well, they met their burden? Okay. And in the criminal justice system, the standard of proof is the highest standard of the law. You have heard of it before. It's called proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay. In civil cases, the standard is lower. It's by preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not. And there's some other standards too, but the criminal standard is the highest standard, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So the law defines proof beyond reasonable doubt as this: proof that leaves you with an abiding conviction that the charge is true. The evidence need not eliminate all possible doubt, because everything in life is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. Okay? All right. In other words, after the people presents all the evidence, you listen to all the evidence, and you believe you do not have a reasonable doubt, okay, that the defendants are guilty, then they've met their burden. That's all I can tell you. There's not much way to define it beyond that, other than that leads to an abiding conviction that the charge is true. Now, understand reasonable doubt, distinguish that from possible doubt. Okay? The district attorney does not have to prove to you beyond all possible or imaginary doubt. It's up to you to decide what's reasonable. Okay? But if you were to employ the standard of imaginary or possible doubt, you're holding the people to an impossible standard. That's not the standard of the law. Well, let me tell you what imaginary or possible doubt means. It's possible that Elvis is still alive, right? Anything is possible in life. And some people, in fact, believe that in their imagination. Okay? But is that reasonable? It's not reasonable, right? Does anybody here, can you uphold this standard? In other words, that if the district attorney has proved to me beyond a reasonable doubt, I can convict. I can find the defendants guilty. Okay. Conversely, does any here believe, well, before I can find the defendant guilty, the district attorney has to prove beyond all possible, all imaginary doubt, no matter how imaginary, no matter how remote. Okay. If they can convince me that Elvis is really dead, then I can convict. But if they can't convince me of that, then I can't convict. Okay. Can you uphold the reasonable doubt standard? Okay, all right, very good. All right. Lastly, I'm gonna say one more thing, and then I'm gonna turn it over to the attorneys. Lastly, in the criminal justice system, the defendants, the accused, has an absolute constitutional right not to testify. Okay? I have no power to call the defendants to testify. This secretary has no power to coerce them to testify. If they choose not to testify in this case, they have an absolute constitutional right not to testify. What that means is that you cannot hold it against them if you're the jury for not testifying if they so choose. Do you understand that? Okay, yeah, you know, in some other type context, you might say, well, I want to hear from them. And because they're not testifying, they must be hiding something. Or maybe, you know, so I'm going to hold that against them. All right? If you were to do that, then you'd be violating one of the most fundamental rights set forth again in our Constitution. Do you understand that? All right. Anybody here has a problem with that? Anybody here thinks, well, you know, if Ms. Paul and Ms. Santurio do not testify, you know, one strike against them. Okay? Look, we will never know, okay? As the parties in this case, you get selected as a jury, you go back to jury room and you deliberate. And we will never know your thinking, right? You might say in the back of your mind, look, I really would have liked to hear from them, because I didn't hear from them. I'm not gonna tell the other jurors, but you know, this is one strike against them, right? And so you could just do that in your mind, in your decision, and we would never know. But I would impress upon you that if you take the oath as a juror, that to be fair and impartial, okay, that you take that oath completely seriously, okay, that in your decision making, you not let the fact that if they choose not to testify, not let it impact your decision, affect your decision, or your deliberations in any way. Okay. Do you understand that? And do you promise to do that? Okay, thank you. All right. With that, counsel, anything else we need to discuss? Yes.